Every country on Earth is in debt. The United States now owes more than $38 trillion, the highest level in its history. Europe carries around $14 trillion. Japan is close to $9 trillion. Even countries we think of as rich and powerful, like Saudi Arabia, Germany, or China, all owe enormous amounts of money. Which leads to a simple but uncomfortable question. If everyone owes money, who exactly is owed? This is Financial Autopsy, where money, power, and history collide. And here's the first thing you need to understand. Debt isn't just a problem. It's the architecture of the modern world. Every war, every financial crisis, every boom and every collapse sits on top of an invisible structure built entirely out of IOUs. And when you follow that structure long enough, you discover something unsettling. The world doesn't really owe money to one single entity. In many ways it owes it to itself. But that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. To understand how we ended up on a planet drowning in more than $315 trillion of total debt, almost 3 times the size of the global economy, we have to go back to the beginning. Long before credit cards, banks' apps, or digital money, the idea of national debt wasn't born on Wall Street. It was born on the battlefield. In 1694, England was at war with France and running out of gold. Desperate for funds, the king turned to wealthy merchants. In exchange for a permanent stream of interest payments, backed by future taxes, those merchants agreed to finance the crown. To manage this new system, the Bank of England was created. It changed everything. For the first time, a government could spend money it didn't yet have. And in return, lenders received something incredibly powerful, a promise from the state, one that could be traded, sold, and passed on to others. That promise became the government bond, the seed of the modern financial system. Other nations quickly followed. France copied the idea, the Netherlands refined it. The newly independent United States adopted it to fund its revolution and later its expansion westward. National debt stopped being a sign of weakness and became a signal of credibility. The ability to borrow became the ability to rule. Empires once conquered land to extract gold. Now they issued bonds to extract interest. The battlefield slowly transformed into a balance sheet. Fast forward 3 centuries and debt has become the world's most important export. The United States owes $38 trillion. Japan owes over $9 trillion. And globally, borrowing grows by roughly $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country owes, every bank lends, and every citizen, through taxes, savings, pensions, and insurance, is both a debtor and a creditor at the same time. Which brings us back to the question, who is really holding the other end of the rope? Let's start with the United States, because its debt isn't just national, it's global. Out of that $38 trillion, about half is publicly held, meaning it's owed to investors rather than to other government agencies. Roughly 2/3 of those investors are American institutions, banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and even the Federal Reserve itself. The remaining third, about $9 trillion, is held abroad. Japan holds around $1 trillion, China about $800 billion. Then come countries like the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So yes, the US is in debt to China, but that represents only about 2% of the total. Most of America's debt is owed to Americans. The Treasury issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve often buys them back, creating new dollars in the process. Americans pay taxes. Those taxes fund interest payments, and the money flows straight into retirement accounts, pensions, and savings funds. It's a closed loop. The debt is real, but the creditor is often just another reflection of the same system. And this loop isn't unique to the United States, it's global. Japan lends to the US through treasuries. The US lends to Europe through institutions like the IMF. Europe lends to developing countries through the World Bank. And those developing countries lend money right back by parking their reserves in Western bonds. It's a planetary game of hot potato, except the potato is made entirely of promises. Every country holds someone else's IOU. Every promise is backed by another promise, like a poker table where every player borrowed their chips from the person next to them. The only rule keeping the game alive is that nobody stands up. Behind all of this sits an even more powerful layer: the markets. Hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks managing tens of trillions of dollars. These institutions decide which countries can borrow cheaply and which ones pay a premium just to survive. When they lose confidence, currencies collapse, governments fall, and entire economies can be reshaped overnight. Democracy may decide who governs, but markets decide who survives. At the center of this system sits the central bank. Central banks don't just manage debt, they create it. Every time the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank buys government bonds, it creates new money in exchange. One balance sheet's liability becomes another balance sheet's asset. Every dollar in circulation represents debt somewhere else. There's no such thing as debt-free money. Every bill, every coin, every digital dollar carries an invisible IOU. For decades, this system has survived on confidence. As long as investors believe governments will keep paying interest, even if they never repay the original amount, the machine keeps running. But when confidence breaks, we've seen what happens. Greece in 2010. Argentina again and again. Sri Lanka when fuel shortages triggered political collapse. When the system cracks, creditors suddenly become very visible. The IMF, rating agencies, and anonymous bondholders who can squeeze entire nations. And yet, even after collapse, the logic never changes. Old debts are restructured. New loans replace them. The machine resets with a new name on the same balance sheet. That's because in the modern world, debt isn't meant to be paid off. It's meant to be rolled over. Governments don't plan to eliminate their debt. Not now. Not ever. That isn't conspiracy. It's policy. When you and I take out a loan, we're expected to repay the principal. Governments work differently. They issue new bonds to pay off old ones, a process called refinancing. Interest becomes the real product. The rent charged for stability. The global economy now depends on that rent, like a shark that has to keep swimming to survive. The United States will never fully repay its $38 trillion. Japan has been rolling over its debt for decades, now exceeding 250% of its GDP, and yet its bond yields remain near zero. Investors aren't waiting to be repaid. They're waiting to renew the deal, because government debt is the safest collateral on earth. A U.S. Treasury bond isn't seen as a liability. It's the foundation of the entire financial system. If governments ever paid off their debt completely, the system would collapse. Banks would lose their safest asset. The money supply would shrink. Deflation would spread. Paying off the debt would destroy the engine that makes the economy work. So governments do the opposite. They keep issuing more, not randomly, but rhythmically. Debt becomes the heartbeat of modern capitalism. That's why promises about paying down the national debt are mostly illusions. The real goal isn't to eliminate debt. It's to keep it believable. Because once belief disappears, numbers stop mattering. Interest rates spike, markets freeze, and economies built entirely on rolling promises grind to a halt. And when we say we owe it to ourselves, That's only half true. Interest payments don't flow evenly. They move upward from workers and taxpayers to institutions and investors. Debt isn't just a transfer between countries, it's a transfer between classes. That's why global inequality and global debt rise together. At the top of this system, there isn't one villain. Not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF. It's all of them. And it's us. The modern financial system has turned debt into money itself. Governments issue it, banks multiply it, investors trade it, and citizens depend on it. The line between debtor and creditor has completely blurred. Debt once meant bondage. Today, it means balance. But if that balance ever breaks, the illusion ends. And we're reminded what debt really is. A promise that can't be kept forever. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.